Got a thumbs up? You want a killer hook plus natural call to action in English that feels suspenseful, curiosity-filled, and forces your viewers to stick till the end. Here's a ready-to-use one tailer for your prisoner who escaped without leaving a trace story. Studio microphone hook plus CTA script intro. Asterisk. Imagine a prisoner locked inside a maximum security cell, doors bolted, guards posted, cameras rolling. And yet by morning, he was gone. No tunnels, no broken locks, no witnesses, just vanished. Asterisk. Asterisk, but here's the part that will keep you awake tonight. Investigators found something inside his cell. Something so bizarre, they kept it hidden from the public for years. Asterisk. Asterisk, what was it? And how could a man escape without leaving a single trace? Stay with me till the end, because the truth behind this mystery is darker than you think. And if you want more chilling stories like this, make sure you hit subscribe right now and drop your ideas in the comments. Who knows? Your story might be the next one we uncover. Asterisk. This grabs instantly, teases a hidden clue, and smoothly adds a subscribe plus comment CTA without breaking suspense. Here's a cinematic YouTube true crime script tailer for your story idea. The prisoner who escaped without leaving a trace. Hashtag studio microphone YouTube voiceover script. / hook midnight to 010. He was locked inside a maximum security cell with guards posted just feet away. And yet by morning he was gone. No tunnels, no broken locks, no witnesses. Just vanished. / suspenseful setup 010 to 040. This wasn't a petty thief or a small-time criminal. This was a man so dangerous, authorities swore he'd never see freedom again. But when the guards opened his cell at dawn, they found nothing but a neatly folded blanket and a chilling silence. No one heard a sound. No one saw a shadow. And to this day, no one can explain how he slipped away. / build-up 040 to 2 o'clock. His name was whispered across newspapers, talk shows, even in prison yards. How did he do it? Cameras showed him entering the cell the night before, but none showed him leaving. The steel doors were locked, the windows sealed with bars too thick for a human body to pass through. It was as if the prison itself had swallowed him. And the strangest part? On the wall of the cell, carved deep into the stone, was a single word, a word investigators refused to release to the public for years. Before I tell you what it said, let me pause here. If you're hooked already, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss more chilling stories like this. / main climax 2 to 3 o'clock. When the word finally leaked, it only deepened the mystery. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a clue about his escape. It was a name no one recognized. A name that would later resurface in another prison hundreds of miles away. A prison where another inmate disappeared. / cliffhanger 3 to 320. Was it a carefully orchestrated escape plan spanning multiple states? Or was it something darker, something that defied logic itself? The truth is, investigators found one final detail in his abandoned cell that might explain everything. And once you hear it, you'll never think about prison escapes the same way again. To be continued. Perfect. Let's pick up exactly where we left off and continue the story in part 2. Hashtag studio microphone YouTube voiceover script, part 2. The prisoner who escaped without leaving a trace. / hook midnight to 010. The guards thought they'd seen everything. But hidden in the shadows of that cell was one final detail. A detail so strange, it still keeps investigators awake at night. / suspenseful setup 010 to 040. Beneath the cot, scratched into the concrete floor, was a symbol. A crude drawing. Circles overlapping, lines intersecting, like a map that led nowhere. Experts couldn't trace it to any gang, any religion, or any cult. But when detectives quietly compared it to prison files from other states, they froze. That same symbol had been found before, in cells where inmates had also disappeared. / build-up 040 to 2 o'clock. These weren't connected prisoners. Different crimes, different years, different prisons. Yet somehow they vanished the same way. And each time, the guards swore it was impossible. No holes. No tunnels. No guard bribed. Just a man gone. And a symbol left behind. One former warden even admitted, off the record, that before the escape, the inmates reported hearing whispers at night, voices that weren't supposed to be there. Some claimed they saw shadows moving across their cell walls, even when the lights were on. Most dismissed it as paranoia, until the day the prisoner vanished without a trace. If this story already has you on edge, subscribe now so you don't miss the next twist in this mystery. /main climax 2 to 3 o'clock. The FBI quietly compiled a file. It wasn't about one man. It was about a pattern. Across decades. Across prisons. The file suggested something chilling. These escapes weren't escapes at all. They might be abductions. But abducted by who or by what? The symbols seemed to point to something older. Something not of this world. And then came the witness. A guard who swore that, just before the prisoner disappeared, he saw a figure standing inside the lock cell. A figure that wasn't on duty. A figure he described only as not human. /cliffhanger 3 to 3:30. So was this the work of a brilliant escape artist? Or a force far beyond human understanding? In the next part, we'll reveal what investigators uncovered when one of these missing inmates actually returned. But he didn't come back the same. To be continued. Perfect. Let's pick up exactly where we left off and continue the story in part 2. #studio microphone YouTube voiceover script part 2. The prisoner who escaped without leaving a trace. /hook midnight to 010. The guards thought they'd seen everything. But hidden in the shadows of that cell was one final detail. A detail so strange, it still keeps investigators awake at night. /suspenseful setup 010 to 040. Beneath the cot, scratched into the concrete floor, was a symbol, a crude drawing, circles overlapping, lines intersecting, like a map that led nowhere. Experts couldn't trace it to any gang, any religion, or any cult. But when detectives quietly compared it to prison files from other states, they froze. That same symbol had been found before, in cells where inmates had also disappeared. /build-up 040 to 2 o'clock. These weren't connected prisoners. Different crimes, different years, different prisons. Yet, somehow, they vanished the same way. And each time, the guard swore it was impossible. No holes, no tunnels, no guards bribed, just a man gone, and a symbol left behind. One former warden even admitted, off the record, that before the escape, the inmates reported hearing whispers at night, voices that weren't supposed to be there. Some claimed they saw shadows moving across their cell walls, even when the lights were on. Most dismissed it as paranoia, until the day the prisoner vanished without a trace. If this story already has you on edge, subscribe now so you don't miss the next twist in this mystery. /main climax 2 to 3 o'clock. The FBI quietly compiled a file. It wasn't about one man. It was about a pattern. Across decades, across prisons, the file suggested something chilling. These escapes weren't escapes at all. They might be abductions. But abducted by who or by what? The symbols seemed to point to something older, something not of this world. And then came the witness. A guard who swore that, just before the prisoner disappeared, he saw a figure standing inside the lock cell. A figure that wasn't on duty. A figure he described only as not human. /cliffhanger 3 to 3:30. So was this the work of a brilliant escape artist? Or a force far beyond human understanding? In the next part, we'll reveal what investigators uncovered when one of these missing inmates actually returned. But he didn't come back the same. To be continued. Got it. Let's roll right into part 3, exactly where we left off, with the inmate who mysteriously returned. #studio microphone YouTube voiceover script, part 3. The prisoner who escaped without leaving a trace. /hook midnight to 010. Months after he vanished, one of the missing inmates came back. But he didn't walk in through the gates. He was just there, inside his lock cell. /suspenseful setup 010 to 040. The guards couldn't believe it. They had checked the cell minutes before. Empty. And now, the man was lying on the cot, staring blankly at the ceiling. He didn't speak. He didn't move. It was as if he'd been placed there like a doll. Build up 040 to 2 o'clock. When they tried to question him, he refused to answer. Days went by before he whispered his first words. But what he said made the blood drain from every investigator's face. They let me go. No one knew who they were. He wouldn't explain. All he did was repeat it, over and over in a hollow voice. They let me go. Doctors examined him. No signs of malnutrition. No bruises. No evidence he'd even left the prison. But the strangest part, his fingerprints had changed, slightly distorted, almost as if the ridges had been rearranged. If this is already giving you chills, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next part of this mystery. Main climax 2 to 3 o'clock. Within a week, the prisoner was dead. No wounds. No illness. He simply collapsed in his cell during the night. But before he died, he carved something into the wall with his own fingernail. That same strange symbol. The overlapping circles. The intersecting lines. Except this time, it wasn't just a symbol. It was accompanied by another word. A word investigators refused to release to the public. But leaked documents suggest it was a date. A date still in the future. Cliffhanger 3 to 3:30. What was he warning about? And why are more prisoners disappearing? Always leaving the same symbol behind. In the next part, we'll explore the theories investigators are too afraid to put on record. Because some believe this isn't just about one prisoner. It's about all of us. To be continued. Perfect. Let's dive straight into part 4, continuing the mystery and raising the stakes. Studio Microphone YouTube voiceover script. Part 4. The prisoner who escaped without leaving a trace. Hook midnight to 012. The symbol, the date, the silence of a dead prisoner. Investigators wanted to dismiss it all as coincidence. But then more inmates began to vanish. Suspenseful setup 012 to 040. Different prisons. Different states. Always the same story. The cameras showed nothing. The doors remained locked. And each time, scratched into the walls, was the same chilling mark. The circles. The lines. The pattern no one could decipher. But one FBI analyst made a connection no one else had noticed. The symbol wasn't random. It was ancient. Build up 040 to 2 o'clock. Hidden deep in archives of old folklore, the shape appeared in cultures separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years. Some called it a seal, others a doorway, and nearly every reference carried the same warning. Those who marked it did not escape. They were taken. The date carved by the returned prisoner was closing in fast. And behind closed doors, officials debated what it meant. Was it the date of another mass escape? Or something much, much worse? And here's where things get darker. A whistleblower claims that the government isn't trying to stop it. They're trying to track it. Because whatever's taking these men might not be finished. If you've been following this story, now's the time to subscribe. You won't want to miss what comes next. Main climax 2 to 3 o'clock. The leaks revealed chilling details. Guards at one prison reported seeing shapes moving in surveillance monitors. Not in the cells, not in the hallways, but inside the screens themselves. As if something was watching from the other side. And then, one of the analysts decoding the symbol vanished too, from his own home, and scratched into his bedroom wall was the same mark. Cliffhanger 3 to 3:30. So what does the date mean? And why are the disappearances spreading beyond prison walls? In the next part, we'll uncover the chilling theory that this symbol isn't just about prisoners. It's about who's next. To be continued. All right, let's push forward into part 5, where the story spread beyond prison walls. Studio Microphone YouTube voiceover script. Part 5. The prisoner who escaped without leaving a trace. Hook midnight to 012. The disappearances were no longer confined to prisons. For the first time, it happened in the outside world. And the victim wasn't a criminal. It was an ordinary man. Suspenseful setup 012 to 040. He was a corrections officer, one of the few who had witnessed a prisoner vanish years earlier. Neighbors saw him mowing his lawn that afternoon. By nightfall, he was gone. No break-in, no struggle, just a quiet house and a single symbol scratched into his kitchen floor. Build-up 040 to 2 o'clock. Investigators tried to keep the case quiet, but his disappearance leaked online, fueling theories that the so-called prison vanishings were escalating. Bloggers began compiling lists of strange missing persons reports. People who had no ties to the prison system, yet vanished in the same impossible way. A nurse in Ohio, a mechanic in Arizona, a college student in Florida. Each case had one thing in common. The date carved in the prisoner's cell was drawing closer, and then one of the victims returned. If this story has you hooked, subscribe now so you don't miss what happens next. Main climax 2 to 3 o'clock. She was a college student, found miles from campus, standing barefoot on the side of the highway at 3 a.m. She wasn't injured. She wasn't confused. She was terrified. When police asked where she'd been, she refused to answer. All she said, in a trembling voice, was, "They're not done yet." On her wrist, scratched into the skin as if burned there, was the same overlapping symbol. Except now, the lines were different, more complex, almost as if it had grown. Cliffhanger 3 to 3:30. Was this an evolution of the symbol? A warning that the phenomenon was spreading? In the next part, we'll reveal what researchers discovered when they overlaid the markings onto a map of the United States, and why the date carved in that prison wall may signal something catastrophic. To be continued. Got it. Let's move into part 6, where the symbol finally reveals its terrifying pattern. Studio microphone YouTube voiceover script. Part 6. The prisoner who escaped without leaving a trace. Hook midnight to 012. When investigators place a symbol on a map, they realize it wasn't random. It was a design stretching across the entire United States. Suspenseful setup 012 to 040. Every missing inmate, every ordinary civilian who vanished. Each location lined up perfectly with the strange, overlapping circles. Together, they formed something chilling, a massive, unfinished pattern. And at the center of that pattern was the exact prison where the first man disappeared. Build-up 040 to 2 o'clock. Researchers noticed something else. The unfinished portion of the pattern pointed toward specific cities. Cities where, quietly and without media coverage, people had begun to go missing. Some skeptics dismissed it as coincidence. But then came the final blow. The date carved by the prisoner wasn't just circled on the map. It was written directly over one of the largest population centers in America. The countdown wasn't just about another disappearance. It looked like the date was marking a mass event. If this story has you on edge, subscribe now so you don't miss what investigators uncovered next. Main climax 2 to 3 o'clock. Documents later leaked from within the Bureau hinted at preparations, evacuation drills, secret meetings, even unmarked vans stationed outside certain neighborhoods. It wasn't a hunt for an escaped prisoner. It was preparation for the date. And then, one final witness came forward. A man who claimed to have survived being taken. Cliffhanger 3 to 3:30. What he described was darker than anything officials wanted to admit. Because if he was telling the truth, the prisoners never escaped. They were being collected. For what purpose? That's what we'll uncover in the next part. To be continued. Perfect. Let's move directly into part 7, focusing on the survivor's chilling testimony. Studio microphone YouTube voiceover script. Part 7. The prisoner who escaped without leaving a trace. Hook midnight to 012. He said he was taken. And if his story is true, the vanished prisoners weren't escaping. They were being held somewhere no one should ever see. Suspenseful setup 012 to 040. The man refused to give his real name. He only agreed to speak in shadows, his voice trembling. He claimed he'd been one of the missing, snatched without warning and returned years later. But where he'd been, that was the part no investigator could forget. / build-up 040 to 2 o'clock, according to him. He didn't wake up in another prison. He woke up in a place that wasn't on any map. The walls were cold, made of something that wasn't stone, wasn't metal. Rows of people stood silently, like they were frozen in place. Some wore prison uniforms. Others wore ordinary clothes, doctors, students, even children. The air buzzed with a low hum, like machinery in the distance. And everywhere he looked, the symbol was carved, burned into the walls, etched into the floor, glowing faintly as if alive. When he asked where he was, a voice whispered from the dark, "You are part of the pattern now." If this account already has you unsettled, subscribe so you don't miss where this story goes next. / main climax, 2 to 3 o'clock. He claimed he saw things moving in the shadows. Not guards, not machines. Figures, tall, thin, featureless. They walked slowly, circling the frozen people, touching their skin as if examining them. Some prisoners vanished before his eyes, dissolving into the glowing walls. Others screamed until their voices went silent. And then, suddenly he woke up, back in his home. No explanation, no marks, except for one. The symbol burned into his forearm like a brand. / cliffhanger 3 to 3:30. Was this the ravings of a traumatized mind, or the only eyewitness account of what really happens after the disappearances? Because according to him, the date isn't the end. It's only the beginning, to be continued. All right, let's bring the story into its next terrifying stage with Part 8, where the foretold date finally arrives. #studio microphone YouTube voiceover script, Part 8. The prisoner who escaped without leaving a trace. / hook midnight to 012. The date carved into the prison wall has finally come, and what unfolded that night was unlike anything authorities had ever seen. / suspenseful setup 012 to 040. Across the country, strange reports flooded in. Power outages, unexplained blackouts, and people, ordinary people, vanishing in the middle of crowded streets. No break-ins, no struggle, just gone. And in every city, witnesses swore they saw the same thing. Shadows moving where there should be none. / build-up 040 to 2 o'clock. Surveillance cameras caught fragments of what happened. Footage showed pedestrians walking calmly, when suddenly they froze for just a moment. Then the image warped, the screen flickered, and when it cleared, the person had vanished. At the same time, hospitals reported dozens of people collapsing into seizures. Each survivor woke up screaming about the same vision: a vast dark room, rows of people standing like statues, and the glowing symbol pulsing across the walls. If you followed this far, subscribe now, because what happens next will change the entire story. / main climax 2 to 3 o'clock. By midnight, the Vanishings spiked. Entire blocks went silent. Phones went dead. Emergency calls described faceless figures moving through neighborhoods, watching from windows, standing in the middle of streets, motionless. And then, at exactly 3:03 a.m., everything stopped. The disappearances ceased. The figures were gone. But when dawn broke, tens of thousands of people across the country were missing, and in their place, carved into walls, sidewalks, even cars, was the same overlapping symbol, this time complete. / cliffhanger 3 to 3:30. So what happens now that the pattern is finished? What was it building toward? In the next part, we'll reveal the chilling theory that this wasn't the end at all, but the activation of something much larger. To be continued. Perfect. Let's move into Part 9, where the mystery begins leaning towards ending, but still builds dread slowly. #studio microphone YouTube voiceover script, Part 9. The prisoner who escaped without leaving a trace. / hook midnight to 012. The pattern was complete, but the vanishings didn't end. They only changed. / suspenseful setup 012 to 040. In the weeks that followed the date, people stopped vanishing en masse. But strange things began to happen instead. Symbols appearing in random places. subway tunnels, abandoned houses, even carved into trees deep in forests, each one glowing faintly in the dark. And those who saw them up close reported the same terrifying feeling, that they were being watched. Build-up 040 to 2 o'clock. Investigators called it psychological hysteria. But the witnesses described identical symptoms: a low hum in their ears, static flickering in their vision, and then dreams of the dark room, the silent rows of people, the faceless figures walking among them. One researcher suggested the complete symbol wasn't the end goal. It was the opening, a doorway large enough for something to step through. If you're still following this, subscribe now, because the truth at the end of this story is darker than anything so far. Main climax, 2 to 3 o'clock. Then came the final disappearance that silenced even the skeptics. The original prison warden, the man who swore no one could escape from his facility. He was found in his office chair, but only his body remained. His fingerprints were gone, every ridge, every line erased. And carved into his desk, perfectly symmetrical, was a completed symbol. Authorities sealed the scene within hours. The official report? Heart failure. But those who saw it firsthand insist it was something else. Something that meant the vanishings weren't random. They were part of a larger design. Cliffhanger 3 to 3:30. So what was the purpose of the pattern? And why did it begin with one prisoner in a locked cell? In the next and possibly final part, we'll bring everything together, because the chilling answer may already be unfolding all around us. To be continued. Perfect. Let's bring this saga to a final conclusion with part 10, closing the story in a way that feels complete but still leaves the audience haunted. #Studio Microphone YouTube voiceover script. Part 10 finale. The prisoner who escaped without leaving a trace. /hook midnight to 012. It began with one man in a locked cell, and it ends with a pattern stretching across the world. This is a final chapter. /suspenseful setup 012 to 040. For years, investigators searched for answers. Prisons, homes, whole cities marked with the same overlapping circles. Vanished prisoners, vanished civilians, and the haunting testimony of those who returned, always whispering the same words. They let me go. Build-up 040 to 2 o'clock. The final files released on the case were heavily redacted, but one detail remained. The completed symbol wasn't just a mark. It was a signal. Patterns on the map, lined up with constellations in the night sky. The date carved into the cell wall matched an astronomical event, a rare alignment of stars and planets. The vanishings were timed. Whatever was happening wasn't random. It was coordinated, planned, and once the alignment passed, the mass disappearances slowed, almost as if the collection was complete. If you stayed with this story from the beginning, make sure to subscribe. This channel is where you'll always find the darkest truths. Main climax 2 to 3 o'clock. So what does it all mean? One theory suggests the vanished were taken to build something. A city, a machine, a vessel. Another, more chilling theory is that they weren't building anything at all. They were the offering, an exchange we'll never fully understand, an agreement between humans and something else, something that doesn't need our permission. And yet, the question remains, why did it all begin with one prisoner in one locked cell? Some believe he wasn't the first victim. He was the first chosen, the one who opened the door. /resolution 3:00 end. Since that night, the symbols have stopped appearing, but the missing have never returned. And if you look closely, in forgotten corners of old prisons, under bridges, in alleys, you can still find the mark. Not glowing, not alive, just waiting, because maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe it was only the first cycle, and the next date, it hasn't been carved yet. Clapperboard final note for outro *. End with a low, echoing hum sound effect. Fade to black. On screen, the words, "The prisoner who escaped without leaving a trace." Case closed. For now,